the development of a distinctly pragmatist concept of experience in the early 20th century. I explain briefly how this concept arose from broader debates concerning the authority of science as an exclusive determinant of ontological commitments. And I indicate that science's authority in this regard was often understood to derive from its empirical method of inquiry. I then go on to elaborate pragmatist reactions to this early 20th century scientism, which took the form of challenging the concept of experience on which it was based. In the view of pragmatists like John Dewey, Alfred North Whitehead, and earlier William James, arguments for science's exclusive authority in determining the qualities of the world were based on a subjectivist concept of experience, in which a distinction between meta-qualities of experience were assumed to have ontological import. Pragmatists offered an alternative concept of experience, which was an inclusive integrity and contained aesthetic and moral values, intuitions, and everyday common sense knowledge. Finally, I explain how the pragmatists conceived of science in relation to this concept of experience. Rather than it being an authority on determining ontologies, science was a powerful method of selectively emphasizing the qualities of experience which can facilitate certain human activities. So the development of a pragmatist concept of experience arguably goes way back into the mid-19th century, as people like William James were opposing the prevalent mechanistic interpretations of evolutionary theory inspired by the positivism of Auguste Comte. But a significant amount of debate and development in pragmatist theories of experience occurred in the early 20th century in response to widespread concerns about the role and authority of scientific inquiry in structuring understandings of reality and humanity. So during this period, as scientific knowledge was becoming increasingly powerful and authoritative, it was simultaneously coming into tension with other ways of understanding the world, which included everyday common sense, intuitions, and value judgments. Debates arose concerning whether or not aspects of everyday human life, well, I missed my spot. Debates arose concerning whether these aspects of everyday human life, which were excluded from scientific understandings, had any important role to play in constructing our more general assessment of what the world is really like. And perhaps most famous and best catalogued among these debates was that which occurred between Albert Einstein on the left here and the French philosopher Henri Bergson on the right, concerning their incompatible theories of time. And there's a great book, which I'll show you in a second, by Jimena Canales called The Physicist and the Philosopher, which gives us a history of these intellectual debates. So Bergson had made an illustrious career, she says, by showing how time should not be understood exclusively through the lens of science. His own philosophical theory of time explained a variety of experiential phenomena that science could not, namely memories, premonitions, expectations, anticipations, and was therefore an important component of any adequate and full understanding of the real nature of time. Einstein's view, in contrast, was that the universe and our knowledge of it could stand just as well without us, that our lived experience of time, including intuitive notions of simultaneity and absolute time, had little to contribute to a valid theory of time per se, and that there was therefore little, if any, worth to Bergson's style of philosophical input. According to histories like that given by Canales, and I'm also not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but I just hope I am, this was a period marked by the decline of the relevance of artistic, literary, philosophical, religious, and other non-scientific approaches to the construction of theories of the world. Arguments in this period for science's epistemic and ontological authority often, not always, but often appealed to its purported empirical nature compared to other unempirical practices. And this is true, for example, of one philosophical tradition, which I know many people here are very familiar with, the logical empiricists, who to a large degree welcomed and encouraged this growing irrelevance of non-scientific features of everyday life for understanding the world and the structure of reality. Rudolf Carnap, for example, in his 1932 essay, The Elimination of Metaphysics Through Logical Analysis of Language, states that the objective validity of value or norm is not empirically verifiable nor deducible from empirical statements, and that all statements, whatever that assert something, are of an empirical nature and belong to factual science. So, as non-scientific aspects of lived human experience were losing their status as genuine consistent constituents of the world, this became an issue to which contemporaneous pragmatists devoted significant attention. They sought to construct a philosophy which could freely accept the standpoint and conclusions of modern science and yet maintain cherished values, everyday knowledge, common sense. And rather than withdrawing into idealism or postulating an independent realm of transcendent values, the pragmatist alternative to early 20th century scientism was to remain empiricist and naturalist, proceeding instead by challenging the concept of experience upon which science's superior empirical status was based. So this, that's Carnap there. This philosophical position, finding various articulations in the work of James, Dewey, Whitehead, and others, begins with a critique of those subjectivist theories of experience, according to which the nature of our immediate experience is the outcome of the perceptive peculiarities of the subject, contrasted with the objective world of nature. In subjectivist theories, experience is viewed as a process which centers in or gathers about or proceeds from a center or subject which is outside the course of natural existence and set over against it. Pragmatist empiricists complain that subjectivist theories of experience have already torn in two the subject matter of experience and the operation and states of experiencing. That is, they've already assumed a distinction between two types of meta-quality in the events of our actual experiences. Some qualities of our experiences are assumed to originate in the objects we are experiencing, the objects themselves, while others are assumed to originate in the mind of the subject. So although we, in some sense, experience emotions, intuitions, aesthetic values, moral values, just as we experience textures, colors, shapes, in subjectivist conceptions, the former qualities apply only to the strictly private world of psychological experience. Additionally, these qualities are determined to be of an ontologically different sort, with some presumed to somewhat adequately conform to the real qualities of nature and its objects, while others are presumed to be merely perspectival imports or distorts of the mind. Starting instead from the immediate facts of our psychological experience, as surely an empiricist should begin. The pragmatist notion of experience, the pragmatist notion of experience puts to one side, initially at least, the attributions of subjective versus objective, and even reality versus appearance. This concept of experience takes for granted no built-in ontological division between qualities we can rightly attribute to nature and those which belong exclusively in our minds. Instead, it takes an experiential integrated unity as the starting point for philosophical thought. Under such a view, we can't presume a straightforward division between elements of our experience that adequately reflect the real qualities of the world and those that represent an adventitious, irrelevant addition. All experiential qualities are, from the offset, plausible candidates for the real qualities of nature and its objects. This perspective results in the externalization of a much vaster host of experiential qualities outwards into nature and reality. Since we experience aesthetic and moral qualities in some sense, these traits may also be supposed to reach down into nature and to testify to something that belongs to nature as truly as does the mechanical structure attributed to it in physical science. Instead of concluding the bare valuelessness of mere matter, we find that empirically speaking, according to the pragmatists, the objects of the world really are, and this is a long quotation from John Dewey's Experience in Nature, poignant, tragic, beautiful, humorous, settled, disturbed, comfortable, annoying, barren, harsh, consoling, splendid, fearful. I don't know why he thought he had to include so many adjectives there, but the idea is that empirically speaking, the objects of nature really have these qualities. The objects of nature possess these qualities immediately and in their own right and behalf, qualities which are as genuine as the characteristics of sun and electron, and are not to be shoved out of being by some trick of logic. Different forms of this view continue to be defended into the 21st century by pragmatists like Hilary Putnam and Richard Bernstein, perhaps most famously in debates concerning the ontological tenability of the fact-value distinction. It's a similar kind of argument because it's pragmatist. So the appeal to science as the only source of empirical knowledge doesn't work in this framework, because the claim that scientific authorities have superior empirical adequacy to other ways of characterizing reality depends on the selection of a subset of elements of experience, pragmatically understood, which are important or are worth a description being empirically adequate for. As has been pointed out in recent discussions of naturalism and empiricism, there's a selection involved in what we take to be our starting point for legitimate experiential evidence. This is a point made by Van Frossen in some recent work, and also Jennifer Nagel has a great article, The Empiricist Concept of Experience, something like that, from 2000. So this is precisely the critique made by pragmatists when they state that experience recognizes in its primary integrity no division between act and material, subject and object, but contains them both in an unanalyzed totality. Maybe not precisely the critique, it's a similar critique. It would be inconsistent in this view to take experience as fundamental in constructing our characterizations of the world and yet narrow our concept of what we experience to exclude those qualities not found in the natural sciences, such as our intuitions, emotions, aesthetic and moral values, common sense, social apprehensions. Our experience does contain these qualities, pragmatically understood. We do perceive choices, values, purposes, and meanings. The distinctions between mind and nature, subjective and objective, and reality and appearance, though, aren't flatly denied in pragmatist empiricism. These distinctions, which we employ as we navigate our environments every day, are deeply embedded in our ontologies. So if the pragmatist argument were to rest as it stands here, it would paradoxically fail to account for these powerful and widely shared intuitions. The version of empiricism employed by pragmatists accounts for the intuitiveness and usefulness of the distinctions drawn within our experience, while reinterpreting what these distinctions ontologically imply about the content they structure. The division of experience into these dichotomous parts doesn't come ready-made within the experiential process itself, but is performed or achieved as an a posteriori operation upon experience. Rather than take these distinctions as if they were given, the task is to note how and why experience is distinguished into subject and object, nature and mental operations. What function do these distinctions serve in human thought and activity? If we consider the qualities we tend to consider objective, they tend to have certain meta qualities which make them available for use in certain forms of activity. Unlike the moral or aesthetic values or emotional states attributable to the mind, which can be complex and intricate, the qualities of experience we attribute to the objects of nature tend to be comparatively simple to define or describe. Objective qualities also tend to be less variable across the experience of different human agents, while much disagreement occurs over aesthetic, moral, and emotional qualities and intuitions. Objective qualities tend to be reliably stable across time and context, while subjective qualities tend to be capricious and fluctuate comparatively a lot. The height or length or chemical structure of an object will remain largely the same from one day to the next, but our aesthetic appraisal of it may not. Finally, and largely due to this reliable stability, objective qualities tend to be reliably connected to other qualities of experience. Thinking pragmatically allows us to consider how the distinguished factors function in the further control and enrichment of the subject matters of crude but total experience. Each of these meta-qualities answers genuine emotional, practical, and intellectual requirements, carrying functional significance and value relative to a variety of human activities and goals. In a tangled and complex environment, we value qualities that are simple. In relying on the cooperation of others, we value qualities which we can agree upon. In an uncertain and ever-changing environment, we value qualities that are reliably stable. In our attempts to predict and control elements of the events of our lives, we value qualities that reliably indicate, bring about, or block other qualities. Were we not to draw distinctions between the qualities we find in our experience, distinctions such as subject and object, mind and nature, or as I'll shortly discuss in a little bit more detail, reality and appearance, we would have no grounds for determining which qualities are likely to be pertinent to the better regulation of the qualities of subsequent experience, whether by virtue of their meta-qualitative function as a reliable indicator or index of other qualities, as agreed upon significant qualities among social agents, or as readily definable, recognizable, and communicable between people. We would consequently have no grounds for deciding between courses of action. So, from a pragmatist perspective, the natural sciences are a practice of selective emphasis, partitioning certain kinds of qualities of experience and nature from others. They're structured to discover those properties and relations of things in virtue of which they are capable of being used as instrumentalities, to disclose those connections of things with one another that determine outcomes and hence can be used as means. As has long been recognized in later 20th century philosophy of science, scientific methods and procedures are structured according to values such as simplicity, repeatability, which can be understood as stability across time and context and agreement between perceivers, scope, reliable connections between qualities, so for example, prediction and law-likeness. The sciences select and isolate those qualities of ordinarily experienced things that are maximally generalizable across perceivers and contexts and are reliably connected with other qualities, so they can be used as means to conjure or avoid qualities in subsequent experience. For example, in our everyday experience of water, its qualities include potability, buoyancy, use as a cleaning agent. One can swim in it, drown in it, put out fire with it. Water also possesses a host of symbolic, ritual, and aesthetic qualities, depending on cultural and historical context. These everyday qualities are localized to ordinary context in which we encounter and use water. The scientific quality of H2O, though, is abstracted and isolated from the qualities of direct experiential enjoyment, which are limited in scope and generality. As pragmatists continue to argue, we privilege physical and chemical classifications since, in the words of Philip Kitcher, a later pragmatist, the features in question turn out to be common constituents of the causal properties that generate the fascinating surface properties. These physical and chemical structures are one type of maximally generalizable quality that reliably generate other qualities we desire. The chemical quality of H2O is reliably connected to the presence of a drinkable substance. It can facilitate the production and purification of water and precisely manipulate its distinct manifestations as a gas, liquid, or solid. It's rendered discernible formerly indiscernible qualities, such as water's purity, and has provided a safe and reliable method for distinguishing water from other transparent liquids. It created new uses for water in chemistry due to its distinctive properties as a solvent and a reactant. H2O is maximally generalizable. It's a maximally generalizable quality of water that opens up new potentialities for its manipulation. So scientific inquiry's process of selective emphasis enables the discovery and isolation of fixed instrumental properties, allowing easier and more diverse manipulation of elements of our experience. Oh, because I'm not ready with that slide. So by recognizing the functions of the distinctions between objective and subjective, mind and nature, but refusing to ontologically reify them, pragmatists can acknowledge and account for the significance of science's power, its predictive accuracy, its technological applications, without drawing an ontological conclusion concerning the unreality of everyday qualities of experience. Science, as a form of selective emphasis, reduces objects from their status as complete objects so as to be treated as signs or indications of other objects. It ignores the majority of the qualities of water, for example, that are localized to a context, focusing on those that are dependable and fruitful signs of other things and can be harnessed for the manipulation of other qualities that interest us. This process, with its knowledge of qualities in their connection to each other, is, of course, why science has such predictive power. It also renders the sciences technologically powerful insofar as our ability to summon or dismiss qualities of our experience is made more extensive and secure. This scientific process of discovery, though, is simultaneously a process of exclusion, resulting in an incomplete characterization of the world. These instrumentalities selected by science for this functional purpose leave out enormous aspects of the complete objects found within experience. Whole swathes of qualities of an object are suppressed in scientific inquiry. So in the understanding of water as H2O, we see nothing of our familiar perceptions of water. In fact, science's functionality in terms of its predictive accuracy and its technological applications and its incompleteness as an account of reality and nature are connected. Those two things are connected. The selective focus on specific qualities is the foundation of science's predictive accuracy and technological application. We're able to manage the water of our everyday experience in a variety of important ways, precisely by suppressing the amalgam of qualities of water. In Whitehead's words, the narrow efficiency of scientific inquiry is the very cause of its supreme methodological success, for it directs attention to just those groups of facts which require investigation. And he says in a later work, science only deals with half the evidence provided by human experience. So for these pragmatists, although science expands the boundary of our experience with new abstract qualities and helps us predict and technologically intervene in the world, it doesn't thereby correct appearances of our experience with a revelation of nature's real qualities. The distinctions we make between qualities in our experience can be important for specific purposes, both everyday and philosophical, but it can be misleading when functional distinctions are reified into rigid dichotomies and then ontologically reified in philosophy. This fact, recognized by pragmatists on issues as various as the analytic-synthetic distinction and the fact-value distinction, applies equally to the very ontological distinction between reality and appearance. William James, assessing the functional psychological principles of attributions of reality, argues that as thinkers with emotional reaction, we give what seems to us a still higher degree. We give what seems to us a still higher degree of reality to whatever things we select and emphasize and turn to with a will. In other words, it's related to interest. Dewey continues in this vein, arguing that people, and philosophers in particular, tend to take that which is of chief value to them at the time as the real. Reality and superior value are equated. So reality and appearance also are functional distinctions. They're functional qualities that we attribute to things based on the use that we have of those qualities in the context. When we select qualities in our experience on the basis of a purpose that requires permanence, simplicity, or perspectival universality, we tend to take those qualities as the exclusively real qualities at that time, forgetting momentarily that they were originally isolated because of a particular need and in order to effect specifiable consequences. This distinction ordinarily does no particular harm. It's at once compensated for by turning to other things, which, since they also present value, are equally real. The reality lapses with the attention, and other qualities in turn relevant to other practicalities and areas of concern are assumed real after their own fashion. The attribution of reality and appearance to the qualities of experiences made according to the context, then properly abandoned with the shift to a different context in which different qualities are pertinent and useful. Problems arise, however, when this distinction, temporarily implemented for contextual purposes, is reified into a dichotomy. It's not noted and remembered, Dewey says, that the favored subject matter is chosen for a purpose, and what is left out is just as real and important in its own characteristic context. As Peirce originally recognized, and many pragmatists have since reaffirmed, the distinctions we draw within our complex and tangled experience, including that between subject and object, mind and nature, and even reality and appearance, function to provide us with control of that and subsequent experience. But they do not prescribe the ontological nature of things any more than they exhaust the qualities and relations of reality in which people may be interested. Using this concept of experience, just to conclude, pragmatist empiricists were able to respect the findings of science without having to insist that the sciences were necessarily displacing philosophical, literary, artistic, religious, and common sense ways of investigating and characterizing reality. This usefulness, the usefulness of this concept of experience as a way of negotiating the roles of science and other forms of activity, everyday activity, in establishing ontologies, still has a great deal of relevance for us today, as discussions of scientism are experiencing a renaissance in philosophy, this time often through the lens of genetics or neuroscience. So I'll close there. Thank you for listening. Here are some references.